Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Laura Sicola with Vocal Impact Productions. On Tuesday, the 29th, is the first of the three presidential debates between former Vice President Joe Biden and current President Donald Trump in leading up to the 2020 election. So, what I want to do is to take a look at what we need to look for in that debate in order to see what's going to move the needle one way or another. Remember, please, that all of my takes on anything political, debates, conventions, etc., are always apolitical. My job is, as a leadership, communication, and influence coach, simply to look at what each candidate is doing, regardless of what I or anybody else thinks of them, and look at what we can take away from those performances and recognize that that was effectively done. This was less effectively done. And so, what do I need to learn for my next performance, presentation, conference call, video, etc., to be able to make sure that I get through as effectively as possible to my audience? So, with that, looking ahead, one of the challenges this year is that I think for the most part, by now, most people have already decided who their candidate of choice is. So the debates are really coming down to be about how to persuade who's left, the fence sitters, to jump onto one side or the other. And for a lot of them, it's what some people are calling a rejection election, where you're not really voting for a candidate, you're casting your vote against somebody else. So the candidate who gains the most ground in the debates is the one who's going to be able to downplay the things that he does that some people find objectionable in order to make sure that those people don't end up holding their nose and voting for the other guy, as far as for those who are on the fence, because you got to be figure out how to make people willing to vote for you even though they don't love something that you've been doing or that you believe or whatever it happens to be. So I want to look at a couple of things for each one of them that they need to bear in mind. Now, remembering that everything that I teach is about alignment in messaging, the verbal, vocal, and visual. Starting with the verbal piece, I think Joe Biden needs to get his messaging straight. One thing that Donald Trump has been absolutely masterful in doing from the beginning, if you look way back in leading up to the 2016 election, it was doing what I have many, many times referred to as tweetable and repeatable messaging, sound bites, short, simple phrases that are easy to repeat, easy to remember, easy to understand. That let people know the deliverable that you're promising, the big so what. So 2016, he had Make America Great Again, Build a Wall, Drain the Swamp, and more. Whether or not you liked them or agreed with them, you got it. This year, as far as the RNC was concerned, once again, the Republicans have things like Keep America Great, Promises Made, Promises Kept, Family, Faith, Freedom, and a couple of other ones that are at least fundamental messages with regard to what they promise, what they stand for. In 2016, Hillary had none of them other than Stronger Together, which is nice, but it's a context to do something. It's not what you're going to do in that context. Same thing this year. The DNC, all they came up with was Build Back Better. And that's not really an end result. It's not it's nice, but it's a context. What are you going to build exactly? What will you do for me? I think it's a big reason that Hillary lost the election in 2016. And I think if Joe Biden does not manage to come up with his version of those, he's going to lose again. I think that'll be a big piece that will contribute to a loss in 2020. Think of it this way. In the business world, when you are doing a presentation, you're giving a pitch, you're trying to explain something, you can talk for an hour, that's fine. But at the end, you have to be able to say, if you remember nothing else, if you forget everything else I've said, remember this and get it down to that little 12-second, 15-second sound bite that's going to stick, that people will get and that they can talk about when they go into their next conversation. So be able to do that. And of course, we as leaders need to be able to do that in our own worlds as well. Now, as far as that is concerned, the second piece, and once again, I'll stick with Joe Biden for the moment. One of his challenges, and this is more on the delivery aspect, is not so much the content itself, but it's going to be a challenge for him to not let Donald Trump distract and fluster him. because when he gets distracted, when he gets flustered, he's a lot less fluent in his speech. And in part, that's because he used to be a stutterer. And that's something that it's fabulous that he was able to overcome that. That's a really difficult challenge. But when there's adrenaline, when there's anxiety, when there's fatigue, when there's all those other physiological challenges in the moment, and a debate is a great context to have all of those challenges, then there's a neurological reaction which makes it harder to speak fluently for anybody, but especially for someone who has a stutter. And as a result, he will end up hesitating a lot more, struggling to find his words, needing to mentally rephrase things before they come out. And that will make him look like he's just not up for it. It'll make people question whether or not he still has it, whether or not he's mentally able or just too old. So it just doesn't look good. Now, content wise, one of the other things he's going to need to do is if President Trump does decide to quote unquote pull some antics, like he during 2016 started pacing behind Hillary Clinton at one point, et cetera, things to throw her off her game, and Biden should be prepared for that to happen. Once again, he needs to come up with uh, some sort of a gut reflex reaction, pre-planned, I should say, that will be his when in doubt, dismiss it, dismiss it, dismiss it. If Trump's going to light a fire, he needs to have the fire extinguisher at the ready all the time. So whether it's just acknowledging up more Trump circus antics, or once again, evidence that this is great reality TV melodrama, not national leadership, or something like that. He needs to have that at the ready to put those ideas in people's mind as far as what this behavior looks like and stands for. Now, as for President Trump, if he's going to be more effective, and once again, effective in the sense of converting people who are on the fence, converting people who had voted for him the first time but maybe aren't ready to vote for him again the second time, the the question that's going to be in a lot of people's minds is going to be regarding the concept of unity. Number one, they're going to ask themselves, can he resist the temptation to speak in terms that are divisive, speaking in terms that divide the American people into us, them, in whatever division line of demarcation he draws? And now, of course, let's be clear about something. Republicans and Democrats habitually blame each other for everything that's wrong in the world. They have, they do, they will continue to do so, and it's frankly tiresome, exhausting, and just annoying. But in this context, nowadays, I think the country is really tired of feeling division. And there are so many people who are ready and protesting for and calling for peace and unification. Um, but so at that point, if he can just downplay or resist the urge to constantly divide, 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 do the divide and conquer approach, where he habitually identifies everybody as either good guy or bad guy. He identifies who the bad guys are, and he tends to prompt people by helping them see where they should hate, fear, or dismiss the bad guy, whoever it is. And those who don't like it and are very sensitive to every time he does that, they want him to stop fanning the flames and to lead without the drama. So knowing that Joe Biden doesn't do that at all, if he can just tone it down a little bit, more people will be able to stomach it than they currently do. And along with that, I think as far as the delivery is concerned, that was a content. The part of the content and delivery is going to be, I think, for him about a civility tone. And I say that because, it's interesting in comparison to Joe Biden, who is, I think, the only person in the primaries who actually cut himself off when the light turned red and indicated that he was out of time. He was like, look, these are the rules. I'm going to play by the rules. Let's just do this conversation, this debate, and get it done. Let's make it work right, as opposed to everybody else who is saying, I want more, I want more, I want more. Now, there are those who would look at Joe Biden and say, aren't you going to throw a punch? Aren't you going to fight harder to get more time? But at the same time, when you are going back and forth, and when if Joe Biden is going to be playing by those rules, and Donald Trump then goes in the other direction and keeps cutting him off, on the one hand, of course, Joe Biden could just look weak. Like, why is he letting this guy walk all over him? He's going to need to be willing to throw a little bit of a punch, or at least fight harder to talk longer in return. Or otherwise, Donald Trump can end up just looking more like a thug if seems to be constantly over overpowering him in an unnecessary way. Like, why are you fighting so hard against somebody who's not trying to throw a punch back at you? And going back to 2016 in the vice presidential debate, when it was Tim Kaine against Mike Pence, I think we saw debate number one where Donald Trump used a lot of these more sort of guerrilla warfare tactics against Hillary Clinton, which took her by surprise, and he completely dominated her in the first debate. Then in the vice presidential election, Tim Kaine came in ready with fist flying, and he came out swinging. And Mike Pence was like, "Yeah, that's not me. That's Donald Trump, but not me. So you can sit here and look like a cross between a schoolyard bully and a puppy pit bull who's just raring for a fight. But I'm not taking the bait." And it actually made Tim Kaine look really foolish. So if Joe Biden can figure out a way to contrast himself and just not take the bait at all and just dismiss him, that'll help him to be more effective. But with regard to civility specifically, content and delivery, one of the things I think Donald Trump really needs to figure out how to do, if he can resist the temptation, is to avoid doing things like name calling and personal insults and those kinds of things. Because in today's day and age, some of the most popular modern leadership gurus like Marshall Goldsmith and Brene Brown are all teaching these rules and these frameworks about what healthy leadership looks like as opposed to toxic leadership. And when a lot of those tactics, those schoolyard tactics or those guerrilla warfare tactics like name calling and using personal insults and things go contrary to what a lot of these other teachings indicate, it's very hard, I think, for a lot of people to be able to reconcile everything they've been trained as leaders in the business world as far as what makes a good leader, what makes someone trustworthy, what kind of leader they want to be or they need to be, and then to watch the president of all people do the exact opposite. I think it's hard for them to reconcile that and to say, well, he's the president, so I guess it's okay. And that's something that, again, it's not that he needs to be a Boy Scout. He just, if he can tone down some of those more visceral, unnecessary um, personal language patterns, I think he will be able to avoid making himself as distasteful to as many people as currently have a hard time with him for that very reason. So this is one of the things, the theme of civility, and can we simply have a civil conversation? That is what Joe Biden has shown is his tendency in the debates. Whether or not it's going to look like weakness remains to be seen. But whether or not Donald Trump can still manage to show dominance without incivility, that's going to be a challenge for him to overcome. So again, these are my takeaways, or I should say my look aheads for the upcoming debate number one on Tuesday evening. Let's see what happens. And I'll be back on Wednesday morning with my analysis, and we will see if any of them decided to take my advice.